Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Neck Cancer Day Symposium. I'm Lindsay, I'm the Director of Communications, and this is...
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm the Program Director for LACNETS.
I want to thank you all for coming and honoring Neck Cancer Day all together, and I'd like to welcome those who are viewing and tuning in on the live stream. A few announcements before we get started. I just want to really thank City of Hope for hosting this symposium. It wouldn't have been possible without City of Hope, especially Dr. Danley. So thank you so much. If anyone is going to be posting about this special day of awareness, I want to remind you to use the hashtags, hashtag Neck Cancer Day or hashtag Let's Talk About Nets. This is the global hashtag that everybody will be using. And with that, I'll pass it off to Lisa.
Great. So thank you again for City of Hope and for hosting us here. I'm just going to introduce a little bit about Dr. Danley for those of you who might not be familiar with him. Dr. Lee is an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Medical Oncology and Therapeutic Research here at City of Hope, and he specializes in oncology and treating GI cancers. So that's NET. And he's currently the co-director of the Neuroendocrine Tumor Program here at City of Hope and leads the efforts also for liver tumors programs. He earned his undergrad degree from Ohio State University and graduated summa cum laude, and then went on to receive his medical doctorate from Weill Cornell Medical College in New York, and pursued his residency in internal medicine in New York Presbyterian Hospital, Cornell Medical Center. He then completed his hematology-oncology fellowship at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City, who, as we know, has some renowned experts in the field of neuroendocrine cancer. And now he, as certified in internal medicine and oncology, he serves on several national committees and authored several research publications and has presented his work nationally. So on top of these achievements, what we really appreciate about Dr. Lee is that he's a huge supporter of LACNETS and of neuroendocrine tumor patients. It was back in February at the Healing Net conference when he told Giovanna and I to dream big. And from that, with his help, Giovanna and I, working with Dr. Lee and with his support, went on to develop Net Vitals, which many of you have already used. It's a 20-question document that serves as a patient-physician communication by empowering patients and also making the doctor's appointment more efficient. And Dr. Lee also encouraged us that day, back in February, to not be afraid to ask for anything. So we asked if maybe he might be willing to host this symposium for Neck Cancer Day. And so here we are today. So thank you again, Dr. Lee and City of Hope.
Thank you, Lisa, for your kind introduction. And I want to welcome everyone to City of Hope. And thanks for joining LACNETS as well as my colleagues here to really celebrate Neck Cancer Day. So I think the purpose of Neck Cancer Day has always been to raise awareness for neuroendocrine tumors. As many of you know, oftentimes this is perceived as a relatively rare disease, but in the last 30 years, the incidence has increased, and we probably see close to 7 per 100,000 individuals in the US diagnosed with neuroendocrine tumors each year. But despite that, I think more awareness is truly needed, both on the physician front as well as the patients themselves. Because oftentimes patients have to go through probably on average 5 or 6 doctors before identifying their diagnosis in the first place and ultimately developing a treatment plan. So I think awareness is definitely needed, and that's what we hope to do. And we hope to do that by specific knowledge that's gained about this illness. But my hope more so than anything else is that we have to have better communication between patients, to each other, and better communication between physicians as well as with their patients. And what does that mean? To me, I envision a day where physicians as well as patients are actually really working together as a team and have absolutely open dialogue, meaning that if we come to a time where we have to be very honest with each other and have to necessarily, maybe make each other a little bit angry because we have different views, that's okay, because that's part of open communication. That's part of really treating each other as family members on this journey. And I hope to, ultimately be able to accomplish that and improve the care of neuroendocrine tumor patients across the world. So, I think the agenda today really reflects on neck cancer awareness. And really, when I was trying to set up the agenda along with LACNETS, I wanted to ask them what was really important. And I think the overall theme for today's day is really the journey of NET patients and coming together with hope. Because I think hope really matters in the sense that this is what I tell my patients is that this is really a long time journey. And you need to have that hope throughout the whole process in order to get you through the journey. And that's what we hope to accomplish today. So what does that mean? What we wanted to do was really set out the agenda in terms of what NET patients would be going through on their ultimate journey. From the very beginning through all the way across the treatment continuum. So while we won't necessarily be talking about specific treatments today, we wanted to give you kind of a behind the scenes in terms of what we think about as physicians in the field, but then also what patients might be experiencing behind the scenes. So this is a journey really from start to beginning, and we have talks really focused on insurance because it's open enrollment period, and this is a really important time for patients in terms of how insurance as well as the financial aspects might play in your journey. And then ultimately, we're going to have a pathologist, Chang, really kind of take you behind the scenes in terms of when you're first diagnosed, understanding your pathology, going behind the scenes, looking underneath the microscope, and what the tumor actually looks like. I don't think any of you guys have really had an insight in terms of what does your tumor look like underneath the microscope and what does it mean. And then ultimately, you're living with this disease on a daily basis, and no one might know about it when you walk around. Your friends might not even know about it and everything. But when we understand what that means on a daily basis, the challenges that you might incur. And so we have invited individuals from our supportive care department who will be introducing you to various venues and various strategies in terms of how do we cope with this, and how do we live life to the fullest while having a diagnosis of NET. And then at the end of the day, we're gonna be discussing really some of the journeys that some of our patients are encountering and really learn from each other. So that's kind of a setup for the whole day. So without further ado, I would like to kind of jump in right into the agenda and introduce our first speaker. So for our first speaker, we will be specifically discussing navigating insurance plans and open enrollments. So I would like to welcome at this time Stephanie Fajuri. So Stephanie is the Program Director of Cancer Legal Resources Center, and she will be specifically telling us really how we navigate through insurance plans during this period as you start your NET journey, and also to help you throughout your NET journey moving forward.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here today. I recognize that it's not the most exciting thing to learn about insurance, so I hope you'll bear with me this morning. I'll do my best to keep it interesting, but there's only so much I can do, so. Okay, so just out of curiosity, how many of you have actually heard of or used the Cancer Legal Resource Center services? Okay, a couple people. So just so you have a sense of who I am and why I'm here, the Cancer Legal Resource Center is a program of the Disability Rights Legal Center. We're based in downtown Los Angeles, but we are a national program. And we provide free information and resources to people who have cancer-related legal questions. So we don't provide direct representation or direct legal advice, but what we can do is provide, like I said, information and resources to help navigate you in the right direction and hopefully help you feel empowered to take some control over either your insurance or employment, government benefits, any sort of those types of issues, and many others. So we have a lot of free information available on our website, which is cancerlegalresources.org. We also provide a lot of webinars. All of them are archived on our YouTube page. This year alone, we've done webinars on cancer and financial toxicity, medical marijuana rights and responsibilities, issues for people with cancer and housing, and many others. So please feel free to check those out if you have an interest. And then I also wanted to let you guys know that I'm not going to be able to stick around for questions today. However, we offer a free, it's a free hotline, which is also available on our website. So if you have legal questions related to your insurance or otherwise that come up, please feel free to reach out to us. You can call us on our toll-free number and leave a message to let us know the best time to get back in touch with you. And the number is 866-THE-CLRC. Or if you are comfortable submitting your information online, it's all confidential. We have an online intake form that will help you sort of skip ahead of the phone tag. So the website is clrcintake.org. So please feel free to submit your questions there if I'm not able to address everything today. One last little plug, we have released an updated version of our patient legal handbook. There are copies available at the registration page, and I'm sure that Lindsay would not want to have to take them all home with her. So please feel free to pick them up, share them with your friends and family. We have a PDF available to download on our website. We have it in English and Spanish, and it covers basically 20 plus of the most common legal issues that we hear about from callers and from folks out in the community when we're at events like this. So like I said, everything from insurance to advanced planning, employment matters, housing, there's government benefits, SSDI, all of that. So please feel free to check that out. Okay, so I'm going to do sort of a quick little overview of insurance, navigating insurance plans, open enrollment. Half an hour is a really short amount of time, although I'm sure to you guys it might feel like a decade that you're sitting here listening to this. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about some insurance basics and overview things that you need to know, regardless of what type of insurance you have. And then I'll go a little bit into open enrollment insurance options. So before I get started, I have a sense that probably a significant amount of you are on Medicare, and then another part of you may have either employer-sponsored insurance or private insurance. Can I just get maybe some hands to see how many of you might be using Medicare? Okay, and then employer insurance? And then anyone on the private market, covered California? Not so much. Okay, that's helpful. Okay, so when it comes to insurance, this is something that I imagine many of you are probably very savvy when it comes to your insurance because you have a complicated health situation, you might need to talk to different doctors, you have a number of different treatments that you might be seeking out. So if any of this is too elementary for you, let's just assume that I'm trying to make sure everyone's on the same page. The most important thing that I have to say about insurance, which is something I hate having to tell people because I hate the reality for myself as well, it is the patient's responsibility to understand his or her health insurance, period. We can rely on our nurses, social workers, oncologists, healthcare providers to maybe point us in the right direction. Maybe they know a lot about what's covered on your plan because you've been seeing them for a while and you've had the same insurance. But I will tell you, I have had issues myself with getting wrong information from my provider. I have had a number of calls, probably more calls than I can even count, from people who've said, hey, I went to the doctor, I assumed this thing was covered, then I got a bill, none of it was covered, what do I do now? Unfortunately, that can put you in a pretty bad spot, especially if it was something that could have been prevented. Sometimes there are, situations where you end up with a out-of-network doctor, even though you actually went to an in-network hospital. That's not what I'm talking about here. Some of that is protected under other laws. But essentially, it is important to know who's in network, and then, certain coverage terms from your plan. Otherwise, the insurance company is basically going to say, sorry, not my problem. So where to find information about your policy? So if you have private insurance, you can certainly look at information in your summary plan description, your evidence of coverage booklet. Most of the time, there is an option on your health insurance company's website. I think most health plans have sort of an online portal where you can go on to access your claims and access who's in your insurance network, theoretically who's in your insurance network, and plan documents. So that's the first place I would look if you're comfortable doing that. If you can't find it online or if it's not available online, you can always contact your health insurance company directly, and they're required to send you a hard copy if you ask for it. There's a few policy terms. Hopefully everyone has at least heard these terms. I'm going to just remind each of you what each of these terms means, because it is important both to understand your current plan, and if you are potentially shopping for a new plan, these are things that you would need to look at. So first, copay. That's the set amount that you're going to pay every time you go see the same provider, or maybe for the same medication. So maybe you have a $20 copay to see your primary care doctor for non-preventive services. Maybe it's $50 copay to go see a specialist. Maybe you have a $200 copay every time you have to go to the emergency room, but it's predictable. That's something that you can count on, and when it comes to your financial situation, that's something that you can maybe try to predict a little bit and will help you manage your budget, as if we have a budget for healthcare needs. So the next term, coinsurance, that instead of a set amount, the coinsurance is a percentage. So that can be a little bit more unpredictable. For example, I think often an MRI, instead of saying, oh, every time you get an MRI, it's going to be $100, usually they will have a coinsurance, and it might say, your insurance document, plan documents might say, oh, you have a 10% coinsurance, or you have a 20% coinsurance. Well, that can be a lot more difficult to budget or to plan for if you don't know what it's 20% of. So sometimes that can require you to maybe contact the hospital or contact the doctor. If there's a service that you are going to have that has a coinsurance, you might be able to get, look, pricing is a little touchy for if you're trying to find out the cost of certain things, but you can certainly always ask and try to find out. You can also contact your insurance company to see what the typical rates are, but coinsurance is a percentage. Deductible is how much you have to pay out of pocket before your insurance kicks in. There are a lot of really high deductible healthcare plans out there these days. Some of them allow you to get either a flexible spending account or a health savings account. I'm not going to give you advice about whether or not those are good options for you. I would say high deductible health plans are pretty challenging for most people unless you have a lot of money. And then there are tax implications when it comes to getting an FSA or an HSA. So I definitely recommend talking to either a financial advisor or, insurance broker, or whoever helps you with your taxes at the end of the year to sort of decide whether that's a good choice for you. One last thing that I really want to highlight is the idea of pre-authorization, because obviously for certain scans and many other services, but I think a lot of scans in particular do require pre-authorization. And you can find that information out by, again, looking at your insurance plan documents. I think even if you have Medicare, there's also information available about what requires pre-authorization or not. What I will say about pre-authorization, which doesn't really make any sense to me, so just take this with a grain of salt, but if something is required to have pre-authorization, so again, let's just use an MRI as an example. If your plan documents say that you have to get pre-authorization in order for the insurance company to pay for the MRI, you would need to go through that process. Usually your doctor or other healthcare provider will submit the pre-authorization request. When it comes to me and my insurance and my money, I will call multiple times to confirm before I actually show up to the appointment so that I know for certain it has been pre-authorized. That being said, even in certain circumstances where something has been pre-authorized, it's possible that the insurance company will later determine that it was not medically necessary. So pre-authorization is a good safeguard against that, and that's another thing that you can use potentially if you have to appeal their ultimate decision. But basically the bottom line is if your insurance company tells you that something has to be pre-authorized, you want to make sure that you go through that process, because if you don't, it's going to be really easy for them to just flat out deny you. So this hopefully is not news to anyone here, but I do from time to time talk to people who are still shocked or still can't believe that they can purchase insurance with a pre-existing condition. So thanks to the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, effective January 1st, 2014, so we're almost 5 years into this, insurance companies are not allowed to take into consideration your health status, previous medical history, family history, genetic information, even your gender when determining whether or not to insure you or how much to charge you. They can't even ask any of those questions. The only things that they can ask about if you are trying to purchase an individual plan is, or for your family, your age. So they can still make some determinations based on your age. How many people the plan is for. So is it for you, or is it for you and your family? And then your geographic area. So prices vary depending on where you live, kind of similar to how car insurance does. So if you live in a really rural area, it might be less expensive than if you live in a really densely populated area. And some states can also take into account tobacco use, but California does not do that. Okay, really quick little update about the Affordable Care Act, since there have been a lot of, it's been in the news quite a bit the last year or so. Hopefully going forward, some of these issues will work themselves out. But, sometimes we get asked, well, wasn't the ACA repealed? What's been going on? It has not been repealed. However, last year when the tax cut was passed by Congress and then signed by the president, one of the things that was changed with respect to the Affordable Care Act was that the penalty for not having insurance has been eliminated. The requirement to have insurance still exists, but the penalty has been removed. It remains to be seen how that's going to play out. The penalty is still in existence for the 2018 tax year. And I assume everyone here has some form of insurance or is trying to get insurance ASAP. So hopefully this isn't something that will affect any of you. But going forward into 2019, if someone does not have insurance, they might not have to pay a penalty. And that could really affect the insurance market quite a bit, as fewer healthy people get insurance, and then the insurance companies are sort of bearing the burden of covering only the sicker people in the country. It's really challenging, and unfortunately, this has already had an effect on 2019 insurance rates. Covered California actually announced back in July that they were raising their rates, I think about 8% from last year, which is about double what it would have gone up had the penalty remained in place. So we'll see how things play out. Okay, so that was a little bit of the background information. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about current insurance options or health coverage options. Really quickly, just want to make a couple distinctions about Medicare versus Medi-Cal. So Medi-Cal, under the Affordable Care Act, has been expanded to not only include people who have very low income, very low assets, and then also have a categorical eligibility, such as being aged, blind, or disabled. Previously, that was sort of the only way you could get on Medi-Cal, is if you had very low income, very low assets, and you were also either determined to be disabled by the Social Security Administration, or you were pregnant, or had dependent children in the household, lots of categories. Now, under the Affordable Care Act, you can potentially get on Medi-Cal based on your income alone. So if you earn less than 138% of the federal poverty line, which for an individual is about $16,000 a year, you could potentially be eligible for Medi-Cal without having to jump through extra hoops. On the other hand, we have Medicare. For the most part, Medicare is for people who are either 65 years old or older, or have been receiving Social Security disability for at least 2 years, so SSDI. Medicare has 4 different parts, potentially. So Part A is hospital coverage for inpatient. Part B is more of the general medical coverage for outpatient services, doctor's visits, et cetera. And then Part D is prescription drug coverage. There's also Medicare Part C, which is somewhat different. So Part C is actually all of those parts combined, and it looks a lot more like a traditional private health insurance plan because it is run by private insurance companies. So whereas Part A, Part B, and Part D are all things you can get, and that's called Original Medicare, you can alternatively sign up for something called a Medicare Advantage plan, which is Part C, which will be more like an HMO or PPO that you may have been used to under your employer health plan or another private plan. So Medicare open enrollment is currently happening. It lasts from October 15th to December 7th every year. So during open enrollment, this is the time that you are able to maybe switch to a Medicare Advantage plan if you don't like your having Original Medicare, or maybe switching the other way around, or maybe you have Medicare Advantage, but you want to switch to a different plan. The plans do change a bit from year to year. So even if you're happy with your current plan, it might be a good idea to check around and see what the other options might be, especially for prescription drug plans. Those do vary quite a bit from year to year. So it's always a good idea to do some of that, a little bit of research. Like I said, even if you're happy, it's good to know what else is out there, especially if you think that your health needs might be changing over the course of the next year. So Medicare is, worthy of its own entire presentation that's much longer than a half an hour. But I do want to just give a quick couple notes about how much it costs to have Medicare. So for Part A, 99% of people in the US who get Part A do not have to pay a premium. The only time you'd have to pay a premium to get Medicare Part A is if you don't have enough work credits. And I think the monthly premium for Medicare Part A, if you don't have enough work credits or haven't been in the US long enough, haven't paid into Social Security long enough, is around $400 a month, which is a lot. So Part B, the insurance premiums will vary quite a bit. It depends on your income a bit, but the average is about $135 a month. Usually if you have original Medicare, it's a 20% coinsurance unless you buy a supplemental plan. Medicare Advantage varies by plan, and Part D, the average is around $35 a month. So for Medicare, I strongly recommend, if you have questions, to reach out. Let's see if I know how to do this. I actually don't know how to use this thing. So the third, if anyone lives in Los Angeles County, which I'm guessing most of you probably do, I strongly recommend reaching out to the HICAP office. It's the Health Insurance Counseling and Assistance Program. It's the Center for Healthcare Rights. Their whole job is to answer questions about Medicare and Medi-Cal. They are who we refer everyone to for Medicare questions. They can explain some of your options, the different plan options available. Medicare Rights Center is also amazing. It's a national program, and they have a lot of good information about Medicare appeals, which I actually shared with a nurse practitioner friend of mine, and she was just over the moon because she was able to help one of her Medicare patients get access to medication. So strongly recommend reaching out to any of these if you have questions about Medicare. Okay, really quickly, because there's just a lot of information to share. So for private insurance, if you are looking to purchase a plan through Covered California or through an insurance broker, this is open enrollment. So open enrollment in California lasts from October 15th to January 15th. If you need coverage to start on January 1st, you absolutely need to purchase coverage before December 15th, usually, in order for it to start the following month. The website's coveredca.com. So for state marketplace insurance, there are a variety of options. This is called the metal tiers. So there are tiers of coverage from bronze up to platinum. And it's not a difference in quality of care or quality necessarily of even networks. It's really a difference of who is paying what percentage for your healthcare. So from bronze, you or the insurance plan pays 60% and you pay 40% of your care, up to platinum, where platinum is the plan pays 90% and you pay 10%. So, you know, some of the lower tiers, bronze and silver, might have lower monthly premiums, but your out-of-pocket costs might end up being quite a bit more. Whereas with platinum or gold, the monthly premiums might be quite a bit more expensive, but the cost sharing might be less. And you're eligible for tax credits if you purchase a plan through Covered California, if your income is within a certain range. So these premium tax credits, if you earn less than 138% of the federal poverty line, you're going to be eligible for Medi-Cal. If you earn between 138 and 400%, which I have the figures here on the slide, so for up to 400%, that'd be for a family of four, about $100,000. Obviously in Southern California, that might not be enough for you and your family of four to be living on. So a lot of people that we talk to actually aren't eligible for tax credits. We talk to people at a whole range of income levels. So if you're not eligible for tax credits, either because you are on Medicare, you need to purchase for your family, or if you earn more than 400% of the federal poverty line, you can also look off of Covered California. You can go directly to the insurance company's website. You can look up plans there. A lot of times the plans are exactly the same as the ones that are offered on Covered California. And I've actually heard from some people, depending on the situation, sometimes the plans are even a little bit less expensive if you buy directly from the insurance company. That makes it pretty challenging to sorry, just totally lost my train of thought. Essentially, it's a good idea to shop around when it comes to purchasing a private plan. So I just really quickly am going to show you what it looks like if you do try to purchase through Covered California. I already mentioned that these are the types of questions that can be asked. One really important thing that I really want to make clear is that if there is a certain doctor or facility that you need to continue to see or want to continue to see and or have upcoming appointments or surgeries scheduled with, that is the most important thing that you are going to be searching for, and I don't recommend searching for it through Covered California. If you need to maintain insurance coverage with a certain doctor, I would call that doctor directly and confirm which plans and policies they actually accept. Regardless of what it says here, regardless of what it says in your insurance plan documents, go straight to the provider, because there has been a lot of misinformation on these websites. I know from talking to actually the NorCal Carcinet group, there were a lot of issues when Covered California first went into effect, because UCSF said that they accepted Blue Shield, but it turned out they didn't accept Blue Shield through Covered California. So again, just wanted to highlight that you really should talk to the doctors directly. It's probably not news that a PPO might provide a much better coverage network than an EPO or HMO. So that's another thing that you can look at when you're looking at the different plans available. If you miss open enrollment, you can potentially get coverage during a special enrollment period. I'm getting the hook, so I'm going through this kind of quickly. There are other health coverage options if you can't get insurance. There's definitely good information about that on our website. And these are the last little bits of resources I wanted to share with you. And thank you so much for having me. Sorry I had to rush through some of the end slides. Thank you.
So, I mean, I certainly learned a lot. I think, you know, that this really speaks to the potential financial impact of being diagnosed with NET. Certainly, you know, when I look at that, you have to potentially pay additional copays and everything, or additional costs for each physician visit. To me, that puts in light in terms of what I might want to do in clinic. You know, so for, well, let's say your monthly injection appointment, do I really need to see you at that time and everything? Because that might be able to have a way to maybe cut down the cost for some of our patients and everything. So I think we can really learn from each other in that sense. So, you know, once you've kind of established the insurance setting and understand, you know, where you're going to be treated and ultimately, you know, how to go about that, I think the next step that's fundamental in a NET patient's journey is really, what is the pathology? And I think it's absolutely crucial, because if you get the pathology wrong, then your entire treatment paradigm is completely messed up. So it's really important to have a good pathology reviewing your slides and ultimately helping the multidisciplinary team to establish the initial treatment plan. So that's where we're going to go next in our agenda. And you know, Dr. Sue Chan is going to really take us behind the scenes and look at NETs underneath the microscope. So Dr. Chan is an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Pathology here at City of Hope. She graduated cum laude from Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and went on to receive her medical doctorate degree from New York Medical College. She ultimately continued and completed numerous fellowships, including at UCLA in pathology, as well as a surgical pathology fellowship at Brigham Women's back in Harvard and Boston, and ultimately completed a cytopathology fellowship at UCLA Health. So at City of Hope, Dr. Chan is an integral part of our neuroendocrine tumor disease team. As I said, you know, pathology is so important. So we review all of your cases in our monthly tumor board. And as kind of how our multidisciplinary clinics are set up, I can always call Dr. Chan immediately at the time of the initial consultation to say, hey, you know, can we go over the pathology? Is this, does this seem right and everything? Because sometimes having a clinician tell you what we're seeing kind of on imaging and everything, it really helps for some of those borderline diagnoses and really develop a coordinated treatment plan. So without further ado, Sue, come up and let us see what you do on a daily basis.
Good morning. Dan, that's a lot of, I'm going to get a big ego after all that and all those nice words. As you said, my name is Sue Chang. I'm an assistant clinical professor at City of Hope, and I wanted to thank LACNETS and Dan for inviting me here today. It's a great privilege to be able to meet with you and see your beautiful faces. As a pathologist, I'm a physician who doesn't always get to see people. Well, I don't see your faces, but it's really nice to meet you. So this is a neat day for me as well. Right off the bat, I have no financial disclosures or conflicts of interest to report. Our itinerary today, I know mostly I wanted to show what neuroendocrine neoplasms look like under the microscope, but I wanted to start actually before the slides ever get to my office. I wanted to talk about what happens between when you get a biopsy or a surgery, between when that happens and when I actually receive the slides. I wanted to talk about what I think about when I am looking at the slides, how I craft a pathology report, the things I'm thinking about, the questions I might call up Dan and say, you know, I'm not really sure about this. Can we talk about it a little bit? All the considerations that happen behind the scenes. I'm going to show some pictures of neuroendocrine neoplasms under the microscope, maybe a smattering of the different types. And then I'd like to go through a sample pathology report to help you sort of see the key components, hopefully give you some key terms, important things to look at. My goal in this is so that when you take home a pathology report, it doesn't look like some gobbledygook or ancient Greek that you need like a decoder ring. There are portions of it that are really important that I think that you should have in the back of your mind at all times in terms of when you go see new doctors or get a second opinion. So I think it really empowers people to know what the pathology report says. And since I can't meet with you in person, this is the best way that I can think of. And then ultimately, you know, I've been a patient too. I know the number one question is, well, what is taking so dang long? Why is the lab so slow? And I'm trying to explain maybe all the things that happen behind the scenes, which explain why it takes so dang long. Quick picture warning, if any of you are a little bit not a fan of blood, the next two pictures have a little bit of blood. I tried to sanitize it a little bit, but I did want to show you what it looks like for me. This is something called gross examination and dissection. Gross examination is an old-timey term. What we really mean is macroscopic examination. So what I see with my eye, without any machines, without an X-ray, although we have all those tools, and what I can see just by observing. This is a type of thing where I would talk about measurements. How big is the tumor? What's the texture of the tumor? What color is it? Does it involve other organs? Did this come from a part of the pancreas? And how much of the pancreas does it involve? Are there lymph nodes that I can tell are involved? Are there blood vessels that I can tell are involved? And the dissection portion is when I take a blade and I cut through the specimen to look at the insides of it. And again, what is the texture? What is the size? If you've received treatment before surgery, how much of the tumor looks like it's been touched by this treatment? How much of it looks like it's still alive and raring to go? This is a description before I even look under the microscope about what I think is going to happen. This is also the time when I decide what portions of this fairly large specimen merits looking under the microscope. So what are key components that I really want to make sure I look at very clearly under the microscope? And this is dissection. So I take the blade and I cut smaller pieces, and this is a critical thinking portion where I try to decide what I might be interested in looking at and what's going to give me the most information. I take a piece of tissue and I put it in this cassette on the right, called a cassette. It's plastic. It's about the size of a small Post-it note, one of those small yellow Post-it notes. And it's got, if you can see, little grates in them. And that's because we close it up and we put it in a big tub of formaldehyde. And the formaldehyde is meant to stop the tissue from disintegrating, and it preserves the tissue. So once tissue has been put in formaldehyde for an amount of time, it stops disintegrating and we can store it for very long periods of time. These are a few of the tissue processor machines that we have. They look kind of unremarkable from the outside, but the inside is actually quite remarkable. The tissue cassettes sit up on the top right here and here, sort of in a big bath. And then underneath it, these are closed, but these tubs of chemicals, all kinds of chemicals, cycle through a computer program. And these are hands-off for us, so we put the cassettes in, we lock the door, we turn on the machine, and it's hands-off, and you can't interrupt it. The shortest program that we have, depending on the tissue that we have, the shortest program is 6 hours long. The longest program is about 10 hours long. And at this time, there's nothing we can do to speed it up. There's no turbo booster or anything like that. So this is a really set lockdown amount of time that we have no results. In order to save time, most hospitals, including City of Hope, run our machines overnight. So we load them up in the evening, and if it makes a certain cutoff, it can sit in the machine and it'll go through the processing. And then in the morning, when our technologist comes in, bright and early at 4 a.m., our first technologist comes in and takes the machines, takes the tissue out of the machines and does something called paraffin embedding. If you've ever had your specimen sent to other hospitals, this is sometimes what we send. He takes the tissue out and he puts it into a little metal mold and then fills it with a clear paraffin wax. And these are 2 pieces of tissue that he's now oriented in a way so they're not crowded and they're not clumped up on each other, so they're lying nice and flat. And then he puts them in the mold and sets them aside so he freezes them. So in this state, colloquially we call them blocks. That's how you might hear about it, slides and blocks. If stored properly, the blocks in a cool, dark place maintain their integrity forever. In the state of California, the legal requirement is to maintain blocks for at least 10 years. Many hospitals actually have their own standards that are even higher. For example, at City of Hope, we retain them forever. They're not on site, they're in an off-site secure storage facility, but many hospitals also have decided long ago that their term is either 50 years or forever. So it also varies, but the minimum is 10 in the state of California. It might be federally. New York has a couple of different requirements. Then we take the block and we cut very, very thin slices, and they're actually see-through. So what we do is put them into another machine and stain them pink and purple and blue so that I can see it under the microscope. And here is finally where I come in. So you see, I'm standing in front of you talking very merrily, but there's actually hundreds of people behind me who have done a lot of work and work very hard to make sure that I can look at a slide and be able to be ready to diagnose something. This isn't me, I just found her on Wikipedia. But I actually wanted to put more than one person on the pathologist slide because I wanted to show that I don't diagnose in a vacuum. I think the best thing we can do is talk to each other, both between pathologists. You can see here, these 3 pathologists are looking down a microscope, and one person is what we're calling driving, and one person is showing what they'd like to talk about, and we collaborate with each other, especially with tricky questions or sort of judgment calls on certain things. And then the bottom picture is pretty old-timey, but on the left is a pathologist and on the right is a surgeon. And as Dan had mentioned, we work together quite a bit and we look at slides together even, because diagnosing in a vacuum is never a great idea. And one of the best things we can do is talk to each other on a case-by-case situation. I want to mention briefly some additional testing. At the time when we first receive a biopsy or a specimen, I don't always know that I need additional testing. It's a case-by-case situation. And a lot of times this is where the timeline can vary, how much additional testing I have to do, something called immunohistochemistry. I'll show you that in a few slides. Molecular testing or genetic testing, we've heard a lot about sequencing of tumors, mutational analysis. That can take a while, and I don't always know that I need to do it until I need to do it. And then something called FISH. And I'm not saying all this to make you dizzy or overwhelmed, but rather to show you that there's so many tools in my arsenal that a lot of times I don't know which ones I'd like to use or need to use until I get to a certain point. Sometimes I get stumped and I need additional testing so that I can sort of answer certain questions. And this is, I think, where a lot of the timeline can vary depending on how everything is going. And I think this is where, you know, the estimate I think we tend to give is 1 week. You know, call back in 1 week or call back in 5 days to see what the results are. And sometimes they're not ready. And many of times this is the reason why. Okay, so let's go over what the pathology report looks like. When you receive, and I hope you do receive your pathology reports and you get them in your hands and you get to look at them, the first thing to do is look in the top. Is it your name? Is it your birth date? Boy, I hope so. We do all kinds of things to make sure that it's the right specimen to the right patient, but at the end of the day, I hope you guys make sure that we've got your details correctly. Clinical information. Is your history correct? A lot of this time, these are questions that come from the oncologist or the endocrinologist or the surgeon, and they have a specific idea. Or they tell me that you are eligible now for a clinical trial, and that helps me understand why we're doing this biopsy at this time. The final diagnosis is really the meat of the report, and we'll go over one in a little bit. The microscopic description is what I saw underneath the microscope. If I have anything profound to say, if anything different, if I found and did any extra testing, this is where I'll talk about it. We discussed the gross or macroscopic description, the size of the tumor, whether or not it looks like it's been treated, and something called the synoptic report. Not all of your reports will have something called a synoptic report, but it's a checklist basically run by our largest organization, the College of American Pathologists, publishes a standardized checklist so that pathologists who talk to each other, and when your report goes from one hospital to another, they know that we've all looked at the same things. So you've all, like a pilot in an airplane, you check through the same thing and everyone makes sure everyone's thought of everything. It's a standardized way, and it's not for all reports, but most large resections get that. It also adds maybe four to 6 pages by the end of it. So your reports can be quite long, I realize. Okay, the final diagnosis. This is where I say, where is it? What is it? Some terms that you, I'm sure, are familiar with: neuroendocrine tumor, neuroendocrine carcinoma, carcinoid, atypical carcinoid, large cell neuroendocrine carcinoma, and small cell neuroendocrine carcinoma. I'll also say if it's well differentiated or poorly differentiated, and a grade, and not the report card type of grading, but the WHO type of grading. So speaking of the grading and the way that we classify them, I think maybe as a historical quirk, the classification of NETs or of neuroendocrine neoplasms actually lives in 4 different books. And I think that's because a lot of times they've been an entity that's been sort of relegated to like a zebra in a larger, more common area. If you talk about lung cancers, people think about the lung cancers that are adenocarcinomas or squamous cell carcinomas. And so the WHO, the World Health Organization, publishes our codified classification of these tumors. And they come out in these books. We call them colloquially blue books. And the pancreas one lives in the endocrine organ book. All the gastrointestinal tract tumors live in the gastrodigestive system book. The lung one lives in the lung book. And the kidney one is 2 pages in the kidney book, 2 pages in a 300-page kidney book. So you can see that they're pretty scattered about, and most places historically have taken the NET, and it depends on what organ they're in, and that's the organ system that they talk about, not necessarily NETs as a whole by themselves as one entity. All right, here's the good stuff. So this is microscopic examination, and here at the bottom, this is the final diagnosis. This is a well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumor. It is grade 1. It involves the pancreas. This over on the left, this pink and mostly pink and purple stuff, is residual pancreas. This is the pancreas that helps you digest your breakfast from this morning. And over on the right, in these little ribbons, these blue ribbons right here, this is a grade 1 neuroendocrine tumor. So this is how I decide that it's involving the pancreas and it's a grade 1. I took this picture because this reminds me of zebra stripes. So you can have little zebra stripes. You can also have them showing up as circles. So this is a well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumor, grade 1. It involves the small intestine. Up on top, these are the glands of your small intestine. These help you absorb nutrients and digest food as well. And this is a fairly large blood vessel. And you can see on the bottom, again, these blue cells in circles. This is your neuroendocrine tumor. Over here, this is a well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumor. This time it's a grade 2, and it's metastatic to the liver. On the upper right-hand corner here, these are some leftover normal liver cells, and this is your tumor right here. You can see some of the cells are a little bit bigger. They don't look quite as orderly. No nice stripes like in the grade 1, and this is fairly well expected. A lot of it is judgment and experience. You match wallpaper and you see millions, and after a while they sort of lump together on their own in your brain. This one is a poorly differentiated neuroendocrine carcinoma, historically also called a small cell carcinoma, very historically called an oat cell carcinoma. I guess because pathologists really like food, and I guess that's what oats look like. I don't really know. So again, the long history and sort of a meandering classification schema and a meandering vocabulary means that sometimes we use 3 different terms to mean the same exact tumor. This is of the lung. I don't have any residual lung in the background, but you can see this looks a bit different. It's darker. Everyone's crowded against each other. They're not respecting each other's spaces. And these are the things that I think of the second I put a slide down. I think, are the cells, what shape are they? What are their neighbors like? Are they respecting each other? Are they in stripes? Are they in nests? Or are they in giant, large sheets? We also do something called immunohistochemistry for the protein expression of the tumor cells. So this helps me decide and determine, is this tumor coming from a certain lineage? Do I know what this tumor is supposed to be, but just sort of went awry biologically and started reproducing many cells? Words you might see in your microscopic description of your pathology reports include synaptophysin and chromogranin. They're just proteins that the cell makes. I'm able to label them and I can see, oh, this does express it. This is a neuroendocrine tumor of some sort. Over here on the right, you see this blue tube that is not brown. That's leftover small intestine. So this is how I know I'm in the small intestine, and the small intestine reacts as I expect it to. It doesn't make the protein. And here's my tumor, and it does make the protein. So again, the World Health Organization makes our grading system, and there's 2 factors to this grading system, something called a Ki-67 proliferation index. This will all be in your microscopic description if you look, and something called a mitotic count. These are 2 different ways to try to guess how quickly the tumor is duplicating, how quickly it's growing. It also, because of historical reasons, depends on the organ that you're talking about. For example, the pancreas, that system showed had a revision in 2017. So this is fairly hot off the press. There is now a well-differentiated NET grade 3, and that doesn't exist in the GI tract system. It doesn't exist in the lung system either. And I put a little cartoony liver to remind me to call this out, especially. And this actually came about because of ongoing long-term research with patients and their liver metastases from what we know to be original primary pancreas tumors. So again, the WHO has been around for a while. Pathology has been along for a long time. And yet in 2017, because of long-term research, we were able to come up with a fourth category of NETs, which I think is really telling about how much there is for us to know and how important it is to have long-term research and long-term follow-up. So you'll see the Ki-67 and the mitoses, I guess, qualify certain tumors for certain grades. Here's the Ki-67. So this is a specialized test that we do, and it's expressed as a ratio or a percentage. Over on the left, you can see this was last week. Dan, this was your patient. We can talk later. And I took a picture with my camera. I printed it on a color printer, and if you're close enough, you can see I took a pen and I counted. I counted 936 on this one. This is my second count. I got up to 2,000 cells. It's a lot of work, and I wish I had an assistant. But fortunately, we now have computer programs, and they do the same thing. So these are 2 different cases. But the one on the right, you can see some of the cells have little green dots on them, and then the brown cells have little red dots on them. And then the computer is able to do a quick count and then give me a % positivity. And actually, in this case, I did it 5 or 6 times, just trying to figure out what the highest percentage was. And that's because we were obligated to count in what we call hotspots, right? So you're judged by it's judged by the highest proliferative area. And not all tumors are always doing the same thing at the same time. So it's interesting to know what portion of it is acting higher. We also do something called a mitotic count. There's a lot of counting in pathology. So mitosis is the process of DNA replication during cell division. And it's a way for us to describe how quickly a tumor is growing. And this is a little cartoon to show you what mitosis looks like. So the DNA lines up in the middle, and then it breaks in half, and now you have 2 cells. And that cartoon looks fine, but this is actually what it looks like under the microscope, this little clumpy looking thing. So I sit there and I count 50 high-powered fields, and then I express it as a X per however many mitoses per 10 high-powered field. So all of this work can be summarized in a 6-word sentence where I tell you where it is, what it is, the differentiation, and the grade. So let's go through one together. Let's read a pathology report. This is a real pathology report. So where is it? A well-differentiated pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor. So it's in the pancreas. What is it? Neuroendocrine tumor. It's well-differentiated and it's a grade 2. And then underneath it, I say, this is how I got to grade 2. The mitoses average 1 per 10 high-powered fields, and the Ki-67 proliferative index up to 4.5%. If you want some more details, here are some details. So I say, I counted 2,000 cells in this case, and the hotspots ranged from 3.3% to 4.5%, and this is how I got to grade 2. And then sometimes, depending on whether or not there's something interesting or remarkable to talk about that I want to make sure that the surgeons or the oncologists know about, or if the report might be going to another pathologist, I want them to know, here's what I was thinking, here's how I came to this conclusion. I'll write a brief paragraph about what the tumor looks like. And you're welcome to read this. I'd love to explain them to you, but to be honest, it's for other pathologists, and it's a nice way to communicate with your other fellow pathologists, because again, we don't always see each other, but in the report or in the notes, we can talk about what we're seeing. That isn't even the end of the story, really. There's an epilogue. So slides can be re-reviewed, and here at our institution are often re-reviewed at multidisciplinary tumor board. Not just the first time you present, but every time there's a new biopsy, I look back at the old ones as far back as I can find, and I try to see, has there been a progression? What does it look like now versus 5 or 6 years ago? And then slides and/or blocks, as you know, they're now permanently fixed and they're storage. They can be sent for a second opinion. If you change your provider and you go to a different hospital, if you move to Massachusetts, all of these things can go with you and they can get re-reviewed over there, so that the pathologist there knows what they're dealing with, and they can have sort of like a history of your whole journey. Well, that's the end. I wanted to thank you so much for your time and attention. I'll be here to answer any questions later. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Sue. It's great to have you on our team, and I think the patients really appreciate kind of understanding what we do on a daily basis from the very beginning. So I think the next part of the journey is really, we figured out the insurance perspective and ultimately your pathologic diagnosis, and with your multidisciplinary team, ultimately established kind of a treatment plan. But at the same time, you're not always here at the hospital. Right? You're not always here at the hospital, at the clinic and everything. And we see you for a brief moment in your journey. And then ultimately you go back home and you have to deal with this on a daily basis. So I think this is where kind of supportive care services really come in. How do you get through the day to day? And how can supportive care services ultimately help you really live life to the fullest while having this diagnosis of a neuroendocrine tumor? So the next session in our agenda is really focusing on this. So I would like to introduce Annette Mercurio. She is the Director of Programs in the Department of Supportive Care and Medicine and the Sheri and Les Biller Patient and Family Resource Center here at City of Hope. So what she's going to be discussing with us is really fortifying your inherent strengths and talking about what City of Hope has to offer in terms of a Department of Supportive Care Medicine, and really being able to support you on a daily basis with this diagnosis.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. I've been looking forward to this, to meeting all of you for weeks. I was thinking a great deal about the subtitle to this talk, really the fortifying our inherent strengths for a variety of reasons. I was thinking about all of you, but also I live in Ventura County in Simi Valley, and this has been such a difficult, week. And, driving in this morning, it was like coming to City of Hope in some ways was like normalizing my world. And, really thinking again about, the feeling of numbness in some way from the events of this week. And then thinking again about, my own resilience and thinking about yours. Personally, I've always disliked the phrase, empowering you. And the reason I do dislike that is because it almost sounds like we're going to do something for you, that we're going to bestow, some power upon you, when really those strengths, those powers are within ourselves. And so in supportive care medicine, as we talk about this department, it really is truly nurturing, fortifying those real strengths that are within you. We don't always feel those as we go through cancer, we go through all kinds of losses and tragedies in life, but they're there. So we'll talk through some of these. My weakness is using these little gadgets here. So we'll see as we go through this. Here we go. So supportive care medicine really is the embodiment of City of Hope's philosophy of focusing on the entire well-being of people. So the physical, psychological, spiritual, emotional well-being. You very well may have heard before about the credo of City of Hope that is on the Golter Gate. It's named after one of City of Hope's early executive directors. And as you can see here, the credo is, there is no profit in curing the body if in the process we destroy the soul. So again, we not only, embody that, but I think really nurturing the soul within us. About 11 years ago or so, City of Hope decided to create the Department of Supportive Care Medicine and pulled together a whole variety of what had been separate departments, and since then has really built on those as well. So for example, I was in charge of a department, and at that time it was a department of patient, family, community education. We really thought institutionally about how can we really pull together in a comprehensive, very integrated way all these services for patients and families, and help make it easier for care professionals here at City of Hope, as well as patients and families, to be able to access this full range of services. So under one umbrella, we have all these different divisions. So they range, as you can see, from having physicians in palliative care and psychiatry and symptom management, to patient navigators, child life specialists, and we even brought volunteer services at City of Hope under this umbrella. We really have worked over the last, 10 years or so to have more and more volunteers who are focused on directly serving patients and families. So for example, we have a program for our bone marrow transplant patients who are often hospitalized for more than a month here. The program is called Art for the Heart. So volunteers bring around to the bone marrow transplant patients a card that has different posters that the patients can choose from. So you want a different picture in your room, and the patient can choose that picture. Again, it's a way also to have a little bit of control over your environment at a time, when you can often feel like you have none. Many, many services. I can't talk about all of those today because I want you to have a chance to experience our wonderful musical therapy, but I wanted to at least show you that we do offer this very comprehensive range of services. And this is just a photo, because I always think behind these words are the people, the human beings. And we have about 130 people as part of our Department of Supportive Care Medicine. It's growing very rapidly. We have at City of Hope the most comprehensive, integrated supportive care program really in the country, if not the world. This is a photo of the Sheri and Les Biller Patient and Family Resource Center. So Sheri and Les Biller really helped us start our whole Department of Supportive Care Medicine back about 12 years ago with a large donation, and they've been continuing to support our work since that period of time. In the Biller Patient and Family Resource Center, we have the physical space, which has, health information resources. We have a coordinator who helps connect patients and families with all the services of our departments, and an area that's just a quiet space. The Biller Patient and Family Resource Center is an oasis. It has a very non-medical feel, and it is meant to be kind of a sanctuary for people to have some quiet time. And then, that connecting patients and families with resources is really its essential mission, that we wanted to have kind of like a one-stop shopping place where patients and families could very easily connect with the full range of services that we offer in supportive care. This is an example. I didn't list all of our education and support programs, but this slide has some of them. So again, what we try to do is from the very moment that our patients and families walk in the door, even before that actually, is connect them with information, with support to help equip them to be their most powerful selves going through the cancer journey. So we have educational programs that range from orientation to City of Hope to chemotherapy education. We have a very unique couples program, and that is based on the idea of giving this what we call our strengths-based approach, that we try to understand what are the needs of the family caregiver as well as the patient, and how can we support the family caregiver's needs and help him or her also support the patient going through the cancer experience as well as possible. We have, in addition, programs such as Caregivers Connect. Again, we're really trying to build up our programs for the family caregivers. We feel like oftentimes the needs of caregivers are neglected, and we want to focus on those as well as on those of the patient. And then some additional programs around well-being. I know that there's a huge interest. I think our most popular programs are probably our nutrition education programs. So for instance, around the holidays that we're approaching, we'll have some very practical education classes. Our dietitians will come in and actually provide some recipes, healthy cooking recipes. They provide recipes for patients who are going through chemotherapy and often, nothing tastes quite right, and help develop some kind of healthy, delicious shakes and smoothies that can be providing, healthy nutrition and help, again, with going through that cancer experience. We have many support groups as well. I didn't list all of those, but diagnosis-specific support groups. So our Healing Arts program, this is part of what you're going to actually experience today. And we have everything from arts and crafts programs to music therapy. So Kimberly Bradstreet, who is going to be facilitating the next session, has been our music therapist here at City of Hope for, she'll tell you for sure how many years, but I think it's somewhere at least 12 years. And so she has a great deal of expertise, not only from her educational training, but she has worked with cancer patients for many years. And we were just talking about when she first started here, she worked with a Mommy and Me, so with 2-year-olds. There's Kimberly in the front row. So hopefully she'll tell you a little bit more about her background as well. And then in addition to that, we use music for soothing type of environment in areas like the infusion areas here, in the lobby of our inpatient facility, and some of the other public waiting areas. We've had harpists here at City of Hope for many years. And then you might see in the lobby of our Halford Hospital, there's a piano. Again, sometimes we'll have pianists come and play just to have soothing music to provide that kind of calm, healing environment. We have yoga classes, and we have many of these classes too are offered both in English and Spanish for that. Mindfulness, massage therapy. I understand that there's been a great deal of interest in this group in massage therapy. We just started working with a company called Soothe that offers free chair massages here too. So maybe you'll come back and we'll have an opportunity to expand some of the offerings that we provide. I hope so. Our Positive Image Center is a place, we have 2 locations of this, and this is to really, again, help care for the appearance, to help both men and women as they're going through cancer treatment, losing hair, experiencing other side effects, to be able to take care of themselves and hopefully enhance their sense of personal well-being by providing everything from, wigs to other types of creams to help alleviate some of the side effects of radiation, for example. Patient navigators. So we have a team who connects with patients and families even before they come to City of Hope and helps them navigate the system. So not just physical navigation, but how do you access your medical record? What if you're coming from, Santa Barbara and you have an appointment today and somehow you wound up with an appointment for tomorrow as well? The navigators can help consolidate appointments. They help problem solve, can help connect patients with interpreter services, a personal face of City of Hope to help really ease the whole going through the complex healthcare system. Cancer Information Resource Nurse, also particularly for patients who want to know more about clinical trials, can help talk about not only City of Hope's clinical trials, but what are other clinical trials that are available, provides other information. And then our resource coordinator connects patients and families with transportation resources, helps them find lodging in the area, the whole range of practical support for patients and families as well. I wanted to just mention at least a little our 2 patient and family advisory councils, because I think this is part of really fortifying the strengths inherent in us. So we have had, this year was the 10th year anniversary of our Patient and Family Advisory Council, and this group of 25 patients and families advises us on development of programs and how to improve services. And you can see the mission that they came up with there in that statement. We have a Spanish-speaking council as well, El Concilio, and they are partnering with us in a variety of ways to make sure that all of our services here at City of Hope are really addressing the specialized needs of our Spanish-speaking patients and families. One of the members of our PFAC is Carmen, and Carmen is a beloved member of our group, and this is a quote that she, as a mouth cancer survivor, provided about the Biller Patient and Family Resource Center and how important the information, the support, the classes that were provided through that center have been to her.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I think certainly I've never been to a NET conference, patient or MD, where we've done this, and I think it really strives and reflects that we want to really try to push the field and look at things differently, and as Lisa and Lindsay said, dream big. So I want to thank the Facebook Live audience as well for tuning in today with us here at City of Hope, along with LACNETS. LACNETS has a monthly patient education session where they're dedicated to covering different topics to really help NET patients on their journey. And I encourage everyone to attend their monthly conference either via Facebook Live or in person going forward. I at least hope that this is really reflective of NET Cancer Day. NET Cancer Day is really about, again, raising awareness for neuroendocrine tumors. But I think specifically for a lot of the topics that we picked, they're not necessarily focused on the traditional diagnosis and treatment paradigm. That can be covered at another time in another conference and everything, but we wanted to highlight the kind of the untold and a lot of times the often neglected topics that a NET cancer patient is really going through while they're going through their NET cancer journey, and really raise awareness in that sense. So I want to thank everyone on Facebook Live for attending, and hope to see you soon, okay? And we're going to take a break now here.